I do want to add other animated features to the background, but I'm also looking at producing my own music for my videos. Certainly a little intro jingle at least. Keep your ears peeled for that in later videos. On today's episode of Keep or Sell, we're going to be looking at the D1 Milano Ultrathin Adventurine. In the very first video I uploaded to this channel, I mentioned a friend at an old workplace that I would debate watches with on a daily basis. He had a saying, buy once, cry once. Just in case that doesn't translate online, he means save and buy what you really want rather than compromising. I fully appreciate that mindset, but every now and again I stray from it and cut a corner. This watch is one of those times. It started with the moon phase from Christopher Ward. I loved the dial, but the price point was too high for me. It then moved on to the release of the Celeste, and I really wanted one, and to be honest, I still might bite the bullet eventually. I didn't have an Adventurine dial in my collection, so I thought before I made a decision on the Celeste, I'd have a look at what else was available. Mainly because I've never actually seen Adventurine in person. Sometimes on video it looks incredible, and sometimes it looks like cheap sparkly glitter. I wasn't quite ready to bite the bullet on what is still a relatively expensive watch. While looking for alternatives, my searches pointed me towards a bit of a pattern. There aren't actually that many other options to the Celeste. A well-built watch with a solid automatic movement, excellent finishing, perfect sizing, and that sparkling dial. Adventurine watches are either expensive when it comes to getting Swiss made on the dial, or they feature in much lower priced fashion watches. Now, I'm sure if I really scour the internet, there would be micro brands out there offering Adventurine dials, and in the comments I'd love to hear about them, but I was feeling time pressure because I was doing these searches on Black Friday. Under different circumstances, I think I would have just bought the Celeste, but two things were holding me back. First of all, the choice of bracelets. At the time I was looking, it was only available on the Consort bracelet, and I was flitting between that and the Beta option. The other thing that was really holding me back was the asking price of £905, which was stretching my budget to its limit. It came down to a choice between buying the Celeste or multiple cheaper watches to bolster my collection. Now I know for a fact that I would love the Celeste. It's a Christopher Ward, and I've absolute confidence in the brand at this point. But the sales got the better of me, and I decided to compromise. I won't talk about the other watches I purchased here, but it's safe to say I didn't spend the entire £900 on the Ultrathin. Far from it, in fact. During the sale I found one available for £260. Now I'm no expert on the brand, but to me I would never have considered a D1 Milano for a few reasons. It's a fashion watch brand, the movement is quartz, and the design is plainly unoriginal, quite clearly aping the Nautilus. I'm sure that many other watch collectors would be put off for the exact same reason. From a distance, I've always dismissed the brand as the kind of thing you'd be overcharged for in a department store. As a brand, D1 Milano were formed in 2013 in, you guessed it, Milan. While the components are internationally sourced, the watches are made in China. They're available from a lot of outlets, including Amazon, and I do have a fear that they're a product that's prone to drop shipping. That's quite a long list of reasons to steer clear. But what it does have going for it is I have at least heard of the brand before, and an Adventurine dial at that price point was enough to make me ignore my reservations and bite the bullet. I figured that at the price I was paying, even if I didn't like it, I could still recoup most of my outgoings through an eBay sale. If I liked the dial but not the watch, maybe it could serve as a test run for the Celeste. Essentially though, what I was actually doing was being quite dismissive and ignorant of what the Ultrathin actually offers. There can be a big difference between a person's perception of a brand, based largely on assumption if I'm being honest, and actually experiencing a watch. When talking with my office friend, we'd often discuss Cartier's quartz options. They were so much cheaper than their automatic alternatives, and with no second hand, there was no tick to even give them away. The same is true for the Ultrathin, but the other benefit you're getting from the quartz movement is hinted at in the name. This watch is only 7mm thick, and there's still a great deal of depth to the dial. It's not as if the handset is pressed against the crystal here. From the moment I put it on, I was impressed. Most of my automatics sit between 10 and 14mm thick. So while I know there are many thin quartz watches out there, to me 7mm just caught me off guard. As soon as I put the Ultrathin on, I started to appreciate why people pay big money for thin watches. Not only that, but at 40mm in diameter, it also just fits into my 36 to 40mm target range. While the design is certainly not remotely original, there are far worse watches you could try and imitate than a Nautilus. Given how thin the watch is, you might expect it to feel light and flimsy. The body of the watch and the bracelet are both constructed from stainless steel, with the bracelet comparatively lightweight and thin compared to most watch bracelets, but still with a reassuringly strong feeling and no air of rattling to it. Beyond that though, the watch is not actually as light as you would expect given the lack of bulk. It's advertised at 100 grams with all links attached, and a good chunk of that comes from the anti-reflective sapphire crystal, but also the aventurine itself. Aventurine is a dense form of quartz crystal that's full of mineral inclusions. It's these minerals that give the crystal its glimmering effect. Essentially, there's some added weight here that you might not initially expect, because you're carrying around a solid layer of sapphire and aventurine. The dial is quite clearly the standout element of the watch to me, outside of its thin specifications. I'd describe aventurine as looking into captured starlight. You can get lost in the dial. To me, it's a little like the marble scene from the end of Men in Black. It feels a bit like peering into the night sky. The other really nice characteristic of aventurine is that in a lot of situations, it's a little more subtle than you might actually think. It's certainly a look at me material, but you only really get the full effect from the crystal when holding it up to the light. For everyday wear, it just looks ever so slightly sparkly compared to a normal dial. Now that I've actually experienced a fashion brand, the things that I'm not such a big a fan of aren't necessarily the things you'd expect. I was initially worried about build quality, worried about the materials used, worried they'd feel cheap and the watch would feel flimsy. None of these are actually true here, but that doesn't mean that this is a perfect watch. Far from it. The clasp is the biggest issue with this watch for me. It's a butterfly, nothing wrong with that, it sits well on wrist, although there are no micro links. The links themselves though are pretty small, so you've got a decent chance of getting a good fit. Just like any other butterfly clasp, there's no micro adjust here, so a high chance you're going to have impression marks left at the end of the day when you take the watch off. None of those quibbles are unique to this watch though. The actual issue is the release mechanism on the butterfly. The watch features a branded lip on one side, so the watch can only be opened and closed one way. Not ideal, but not the end of the world. The lack of a button release is the problem though. The only way to get the watch off is to pry the edges apart. It's functional, just not the most practical or user-friendly design choice. In fairness to it, I think it's been designed with thinness as the main objective, and on that front, it's definitely succeeded. Another issue is caused by the exact same design objective. The sapphire crystal is completely flat to keep the thickness to a minimum. The problem is that it shows up fingerprint marks and smudges very easily, so you often find yourself cleaning the watch to get a better look at the dial. And when the dial is the main selling point of the watch, anything that gets in the way of that experience is not exactly ideal. The last problem with the watch is really quite a critical issue compared to the other two I've raised. The legibility on this watch is terrible. The watch is darkened stainless steel, the dial is black, sparkly and reflective, and the hands and indices are dark and mirrored. So from a lot of angles, it's actually impossible to accurately read the time. This is a watch that you have to move around a fair bit in the light to actually work out what the time is. Now that does make it hopelessly impractical. But as far as flaws go, with this particular model, I don't actually mind it taking longer to read the time, because all that means is more time spent looking at that dial. So on to the big question at hand. Is the D1 Milano Adventurine Ultrathin a keeper, or is it making its way onto eBay? As I've said, this certainly is not a perfect watch, but it has done a few things for me. It's shown me that not every fashion watch should just be dismissed without a moment's consideration, and crucially, it's gone a long way to scratch my aventurine itch. While I still absolutely love the Celeste, I'm nowhere near as close to buying one as I was before the Ultrathin. It spent a surprising amount of time on wrist to boot, with the quartz movement making it a very easy grab and go option, and its dark styling meaning it goes well with most outfits. What really made my mind up here wasn't the dial though. It was just how thin the watch is. I don't own anything else like it, and at present it's still the only Adventurine watch in my collection, so it finds itself a nice little niche. I talked about buy once, cry once at the start of the video, but even if I do go on to buy the Celeste, I certainly wouldn't be crying about or replacing the Ultrathin. Beyond that, it's also a solid value for money proposition in my opinion, and for that reason, I'll be keeping it. As ever, thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on the Ultrathin? Would you ever consider a fashion brand, or a quartz movement for that matter? Let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing if you want to see more.